Marcus Rodriguez was not just any fighter. He was a man who had tasted victory so many times that defeat seemed impossible. At 28 years old, his body was like a machine built for fighting. Every muscle in his arms and legs had been shaped by years of training. His hands were weapons and his feet were even deadlier. When Marcus walked into a room, people noticed him right away. He stood 6 feet tall, and his shoulders were broad like a mountain. His dark hair was always perfectly styled, and his eyes held the confidence of someone who had never truly lost. The walls of his apartment were covered with golden trophies and shiny medals. 3 international kickboxing championship belts hung in frames like precious artwork. Each one told a story of victory. Each one reminded Marcus that he was special. He had earned the nickname Thunder Kick because when his foot connected with an opponent, it sounded like thunder rolling across the sky. The power in his legs could break wooden boards as easily as snapping a pencil. When he practiced his signature roundhouse kick, the air would whistle, and everyone in the gym would stop to watch. Marcus had grown up in a small town in Texas where nobody expected much from him. His father worked at a factory and his mother cleaned houses for wealthy families. They were good people, but they lived simple lives. Marcus wanted more. He wanted the world to know his name. He started training in martial arts when he was 12 years old. At first, he was just another kid in baggy clothes trying to learn basic moves. But Marcus had something different inside him. He had hunger. He had fire. He trained when other kids were playing video games. He practiced when other kids were sleeping. By the time Marcus turned 18, he was already winning local tournaments. College was not for him. Books and classrooms felt like cages. The fighting ring was where he belonged. His first professional fight was against a man twice his age with twice his experience. Marcus knocked him out in the second round with a kick that the crowd still talks about today. That was the beginning of his legend. Fight after fight, Marcus climbed higher. He traveled to different countries and defeated champions from around the world. Success brought money and money brought comfort. Marcus bought expensive cars and designer clothes. He moved to a luxury apartment in the city. Pretty women wanted to be seen with him. Reporters wanted to interview him. Sponsors offered him deals worth millions of dollars. Marcus loved every minute of it. He loved the attention and the respect. Most of all, he loved the feeling of being unbeatable. In his mind, no one could touch him. No challenge was too big. No opponent was too strong. The problem with always winning is that it can make a person forget how to lose gracefully. Marcus began to believe his own hype. He started thinking he was not just a great fighter, but a great person. He forgot about the hard work and luck that had brought him success. He forgot about the people who had helped him along the way. Pride grew in his heart like a poison plant. It made him see other people as less important than himself. It made him think rules did not apply to him. His friends began to notice changes in Marcus. He would interrupt people when they were talking. He would make jokes that hurt people's feelings. He expected special treatment everywhere he went. When someone disagreed with him, he would get angry. When someone challenged him, he would threaten to fight them. Jake, his longtime training partner and best friend, tried to talk to him about it. But Marcus would just laugh and say that champions deserve to act like champions. The fighting world is small and word travels fast. Other fighters started calling Marcus arrogant behind his back. Some of his sponsors began to worry about his attitude. But Marcus did not care what anyone thought. He had his trophies and his fame and his money. In his mind, that was enough to prove he was right about everything. He was the Thunder Kick champion, and that title made him feel like he could do anything he wanted to anyone he wanted. This dangerous thinking would soon lead him to make the biggest mistake of his life. The idea to travel to Thailand came to Marcus during a late-night training session. He had just finished demolishing 3 heavy bags in a row when his coach mentioned the legendary martial arts schools of Bangkok. Thailand was the birthplace of Muay Thai and home to some of the most respected fighting academies in the world. For most fighters, a trip to Thailand was like a pilgrimage. It was a chance to learn from masters who had dedicated their entire lives to the art of combat. Marcus saw it differently. In his mind, Thailand would be just another place for him to show off his superior skills. He imagined himself walking into ancient dodos and impressing the local fighters with his thunder kick. He pictured old masters bowing to him with respect. The thought of being the American champion who came to Thailand and amazed everyone filled him with excitement. He booked his flight that same night without asking anyone for advice. Jake, his training partner and closest friend, was supposed to come with him. Jake was different from Marcus in many ways. Where Marcus was loud and flashy, Jake was quiet and thoughtful. Where Marcus sought attention, Jake preferred to stay in the background. Jake had been worried about his friend for months. He had watched Marcus change from a dedicated fighter into someone who seemed to care more about fame than fighting. The trip to Thailand made Jake nervous, but he hoped that training in a traditional setting might help Marcus remember why he started fighting in the first place. The flight to Bangkok took 18 hours with 2 stops. Marcus spent most of the journey talking to other passengers about his championships and showing videos of his best fights on his phone. He told the flight attendants about his plans to train with Thai masters and maybe even challenge some local champions. Jake tried to sleep, but Marcus kept waking him up to share his grand plans. By the time they landed, Jake already felt exhausted, and they had not even started training yet. Bangkok hit them like a wave of heat and humidity the moment they stepped off the plane. The air was thick and heavy and filled with unfamiliar smells. The sounds of traffic and street vendors created a constant buzz that was nothing like home. Marcus loved it immediately. Everything was new and exciting and different. The crowds of people, the colorful signs in Thai script, the motorcycles weaving through impossible traffic jams, all of it felt like an adventure waiting to happen. Their hotel was in the heart of the city near the famous Khao San Road. The building was old but clean, and their room had a view of ancient temples mixed with modern skyscrapers. Marcus spent their first evening exploring the night markets and trying street food. He bought souvenirs and took hundreds of photos. Everything was going exactly as he had imagined. Thailand was going to be his playground, and he was going to be the star of the show. The martial arts academy they had chosen was called Tiger Dragon Gym. It was run by a 70-year-old master named Kru Sum Kai, who had trained champions for over 40 years. The gym was not fancy like the places Marcus was used to back home. The walls were concrete painted yellow and green. Heavy bags hung from thick chains that looked like they had been there for decades. The floor was covered with old mats that had absorbed the sweat of thousands of fighters. On their first morning, Master Somchai welcomed them with traditional respect. He pressed his palms together and bowed slightly. Marcus barely returned the gesture. He was too busy looking around the gym and sizing up the other fighters. Most of them were young Thai men who looked lean and tough. Marcus was confident he could beat any of them easily. After all, he was an international champion, and they were just local fighters. This would be easier than he thought. After 3 days of intense training at Tiger Dragon Gym, Marcus was feeling restless. The workouts were challenging, but he had expected to impress everyone with his skills. Instead, the local fighters treated him like just another student. Master Sumkai was polite, but not particularly amazed by his techniques. The old man had seen thousands of fighters over the years, and Marcus was beginning to realize he was not as special here as he was back home. Jake suggested they take a break from training and explore some of Bangkok's famous cultural sites. He had read about the Grand Palace in their guidebook and thought it would be educational to learn about Thai history and traditions. Marcus was not interested in history, but he was bored and needed something to do. Plus, he thought walking around the city might give him more opportunities to show off and get attention from tourists who might recognize him. The Grand Palace was unlike anything either of them had ever seen. The complex covered over 50 acres and contained dozens of buildings with golden roofs that sparkled in the sunlight. Intricate carvings covered every surface, and colorful murals told stories of ancient kings and mythical creatures. Thousands of tourists from around the world wandered through the courtyards, taking photos and listening to tour guides explain the history of the Thai royal family. Marcus was impressed despite himself, but not in the way Jake had hoped. Instead of appreciating the culture and history, Marcus was mainly interested in how the exotic location would look in his social media posts. He posed for selfies in front of every major building and asked Jake to take action shots of him throwing practice kicks near the ancient walls. Other tourists stopped to watch, and a few even asked for photos with him. This was more like what Marcus had expected from his Thailand adventure. As they walked deeper into the palace complex, they came across areas that were less crowded with tourists. These sections felt more serious and formal. The buildings here were still beautiful, but they had an air of importance that made even Marcus lower his voice slightly. Signs in multiple languages explained that they were entering areas related to current royal ceremonies and government functions. Security guards in crisp uniforms stood at various checkpoints checking tickets and keeping watch over the crowds. It was in one of these quieter courtyards that Marcus first saw him. Standing perfectly still near the entrance to an important-looking building was a figure that seemed almost too perfect to be real. The man wore an elaborate uniform that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. Gold buttons ran down the front of his dark blue jacket. His white pants had gold stripes down the sides. On his head sat a tall hat decorated with colorful feathers and royal insignia. At his side hung an ornate sword with a jeweled handle that caught the light when the sun hit it just right. This was Sergeant Chai Patana, though Marcus had no way of knowing his name or his story. Chai had served in the Royal Guard for 15 years. He had earned his position through years of military training and had proven his dedication to protecting the honor of the Thai monarchy countless times. Standing guard was not just his job, it was his calling. He took pride in his ability to remain perfectly motionless for hours at a time regardless of weather or distractions. Jake was fascinated by the Guard and wanted to read more about the history and significance of the Royal Guard tradition. He pulled out his guidebook and started reading quietly about the role these men played in Thai society. Marcus had a different reaction entirely. To him, the Guard looked like a statue or a performer put there for the entertainment of tourists. The idea that someone would stand so still for so long struck him as ridiculous rather than admirable. Marcus began to circle the Guard, slowly studying him like he was examining a work of art in a museum. Other tourists were also curious, but they maintained a respectful distance and spoke in whispers. Marcus got closer. He noticed that the Guard never blinked or moved even when people walked right in front of him. A small crowd began to gather as Marcus continued his examination. Some people started taking photos of both Marcus and the Guard, sensing that something interesting might be about to happen. The seed of a terrible idea began growing in Marcus's mind. Here was a perfect opportunity to entertain the crowd and show off his personality. These tourists had no idea who he was, but if he could make them laugh and get their attention, he might gain some new fans. Plus, the Guard looked so serious and formal that Marcus felt an almost irresistible urge to see if he could crack that perfect composure. After all, what was the worst that could happen? The crowd had grown to nearly 50 people, and Marcus was feeding off their energy like a performer on stage. Children were pointing and laughing. Teenagers were sharing videos on social media in real time. Even some adults who should have known better were encouraging him with their laughter and applause. Marcus felt like he was back in the ring with thousands of fans cheering his name. This was the attention he had been craving since arriving in Thailand. But Sergeant Che remained absolutely motionless through it all. His discipline was remarkable and came from years of rigorous training. Royal Guards were selected not just for their physical abilities, but for their mental strength. They learned to endure heat, cold, rain, and wind without moving. They'd practiced standing still for 8-hour shifts. They were taught that their duty was more important than their comfort or personal feelings. Che had stood through typhoons and festivals and protests. One disrespectful tourist was not going to break his concentration. This only frustrated Marcus more. He was used to getting reactions from people. In the fighting world, opponents would get angry or scared when he taunted them. Reporters would ask him questions when he made outrageous statements. Fans would cheer or boo depending on what he said. But this Guard was giving him nothing. It was like trying to intimidate a mountain. The lack of response made Marcus feel ignored and unimportant, which was the one thing his ego could not handle. Jake could see where this was heading and made one last desperate attempt to stop his friend. He grabbed Marcus by the shoulder and spoke directly into his ear, telling him that enough was enough and they needed to leave right now. But Marcus shrugged him off roughly and told him to relax because everything was under control. Jake stepped back, feeling helpless and embarrassed. He loved Marcus like a brother, but he was beginning to realize there might be nothing he could do to prevent what was coming next. Marcus decided it was time to bring out his secret weapon. If regular taunting and jokes were not getting a reaction, then maybe a display of his fighting skills would do the trick. He announced to the crowd that he was going to show them what a real warrior looked like compared to a statue. He began throwing practice punches in the air near the guard's head. Each punch was fast and precise and made whooshing sounds that impressed the tourists. Marcus was careful not to actually hit the guard, but he came close enough that everyone could see his speed and power. The crowd was amazed by Marcus's athletic ability. His punches were lightning fast, and his footwork was smooth and professional. Some people started asking if he was a professional fighter or martial arts instructor. Marcus loved the questions and began explaining about his championship titles and his famous thunder kick. Now he was not just entertaining the crowd, he was also promoting himself. This was turning into the perfect day. Sergeant Che could feel the wind from the punches brushing past his face, but he did not flinch. His training had prepared him for much worse situations than this. He had been tested by instructors who fired blank rounds near his head and set off firecrackers at his feet. He had stood guard during political demonstrations where angry protesters had screamed inches from his face. One arrogant tourist throwing air punches was nothing compared to what he had already endured. But Marcus interpreted the guard's lack of reaction as fear or weakness. In his mind, anyone who would not respond to such an obvious challenge must be too scared or too weak to fight back. This made Marcus feel even more superior and confident. He began taunting the guard more directly, calling him a coward and questioning whether he was even a real soldier. He asked the crowd if they wanted to see what would happen if a real fighter faced off against a fake one. The atmosphere began to change as Marcus's behavior became more aggressive. The families with young children started moving away, sensing that the fun was turning into something darker. Some of the Thai locals in the crowd looked genuinely upset and began speaking to each other in urgent whispers. A few tourists stopped laughing and started looking uncomfortable. But Marcus was too caught up in his performance to notice these warning signs. Security guards stationed around the palace complex had begun to take notice of the commotion. They started moving closer to the scene while speaking into their radios. The situation was escalating beyond normal tourist behavior, and they were preparing to intervene if necessary. But they were also trained to avoid creating incidents with foreign visitors when possible, so they held back, hoping the situation would resolve itself peacefully. Marcus was completely unaware that he was being watched by professional security personnel. All he could see was his audience and his target. The guard's continued stillness was driving him crazy with frustration. He had run out of verbal taunts and practice punches. There was only one thing left that might finally get a reaction from this human statue. Marcus stepped back and assumed his fighting stance. It was time to show everyone his famous thunder kick. Marcus stepped back about 10 feet from Sergeant Che and began stretching his legs in preparation for his signature move. The crowd sensed that something big was about to happen, and more people gathered around the scene. Phones and cameras were pointed in his direction from every angle. This was exactly the kind of moment Marcus lived for. He was about to demonstrate the kick that had made him famous to an audience that would never forget what they witnessed. The thunder kick was not just any ordinary kick. Marcus had spent years perfecting the technique and building the leg strength necessary to execute it properly. The move involved a running start followed by a leap into the air, and a devastating roundhouse kick that could generate over 1,500 pounds of force per square inch. He had used this kick to win championships and break records. Wooden boards 3 inches thick would explode into splinters when hit by his thunder kick. Jake realized what his friend was planning and felt his stomach drop with horror. He shouted at Marcus to stop and tried to push through the crowd to reach him, but there were too many people in the way. Other tourists thought Jake was just being overly cautious and told him to relax because his friend obviously knew what he was doing. They had no idea they were about to witness an international incident in the making. Marcus announced to the crowd that he was going to demonstrate his world-famous thunder kick right next to the guard's head. He promised everyone that he had perfect control and would stop just inches from the guard's face. The crowd held their breath in anticipation. Some people started recording videos with their phones while others stepped back to give him more room. Everyone expected to see an amazing display of athletic skill and precision. Sergeant Che heard every word but remained perfectly still. His training had taught him that the best way to handle provocations was to ignore them completely. He had faith that his fellow guards and security personnel would intervene if the situation became truly dangerous. In his 15 years of service, he had never broken his composure, and he was not going to start now, no matter what this foolish tourist tried to do. Marcus took several deep breaths and focused his mind the way he did before important fights. He visualized the perfect execution of his kick, stopping exactly where he intended it to stop. He could see the amazement on the faces of the crowd when they realized how much skill and control he possessed. This would be the highlight of his entire Thailand trip and probably generate millions of views when the videos went viral online. The security guards around the palace had been watching the situation develop and were now moving closer with serious concern. They could see that the American tourist was preparing to do something that might cross the line from harmless showing off to actual assault. Several guards spoke rapidly into their radios requesting backup and instructions from their supervisors, but they were still too far away to intervene before Marcus made his move. With a loud shout that echoed off the palace walls, Marcus began his running approach. His form was perfect as he built up speed and momentum. The crowd watched in amazement as this obviously skilled athlete prepared to demonstrate his abilities. Marcus felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with performing his signature move. Everything was going according to plan, and he was completely confident in his ability to control the kick perfectly. But physics and overconfidence are a dangerous combination. As Marcus leaped into the air and launched his thunder kick with championship-level power, he made a critical miscalculation. The excitement of performing for a crowd combined with his desire to make the kick look as impressive as possible caused him to put slightly more force into the move than he had intended. His body position was also affected by the uneven cobblestone surface, which was different from the smooth mats he was used to training on. The kick that was supposed to stop inches from Sergeant Che's face instead connected solidly with the side of his ceremonial hat. The impact was tremendous, and the ornate headpiece went flying across the courtyard like a cannonball. Feathers and decorative elements scattered in all directions. The sound of the impact was like a gunshot echoing off the ancient walls. The crowd gasped in collective shock and horror as they realized what had just happened. Marcus landed awkwardly off balance and stumbled forward several steps before catching himself. For a moment, time seemed frozen as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. The cocky smile faded from Marcus's face as he looked at the guard's disheveled hair and the scattered remains of the ceremonial hat lying 20 feet away. He had just physically assaulted a member of the Thai Royal Guard in front of 50 witnesses and multiple cameras. Sergeant Che slowly turned his head and looked directly at Marcus for the first time. His eyes were filled not with anger, but with a cold professional assessment that made Marcus's blood freeze in his veins. Without saying a word, the guard raised his hand and made a subtle gesture that Marcus did not understand, but that sent every Thai person in the vicinity immediately backing away from the scene. The real consequences were about to begin. The signal that Sergeant Che gave was small and subtle, but it carried the weight of 15 years of military training and protocol. Within seconds, the peaceful courtyard transformed into a scene of coordinated action that would have impressed any military observer. Royal guards and security personnel seemed to materialize from nowhere, moving with the precision of a well-rehearsed drill. Marcus had thought he was dealing with one ceremonial statue, but he was about to learn that he had attacked a member of one of the most elite and respected military units in Thailand. 6 royal guards appeared in a perfect circle around Marcus, before he could even fully comprehend what was happening. These were not the young recruits or ceremonial soldiers that Marcus had imagined in his ignorance. These were battle-tested veterans who had served in combat zones and peacekeeping missions around the world. Each man was trained in multiple forms of martial arts, including techniques that Marcus had never even heard of. Their movements were swift, silent, and absolutely coordinated. The guards did not speak or shout or make any unnecessary noise. They simply took their positions and waited for orders with the calm professionalism that comes from years of training and discipline. Marcus found himself surrounded by men who radiated an aura of controlled power that made his own fighting abilities seem insignificant by comparison. For the first time in his adult life, he felt genuinely intimidated and outmatched. Jake finally managed to push through the crowd and reached his friend just as the guards were forming their circle. He grabbed Marcus by the arm and tried to pull him away while whispering urgently that they needed to leave immediately. But it was already too late for escape. The guards had positioned themselves to prevent any movement, and more security personnel were arriving every minute. The situation had escalated beyond anything that could be resolved with apologies or excuses. The crowd of tourists had grown silent, and many people were backing away from the scene. The atmosphere had changed completely from entertainment to genuine fear. Parents were gathering their children and moving toward the exits. The laughter and excited chatter had been replaced by nervous whispers, and the clicking of camera shutters as people documented what they sensed was a serious international incident unfolding before their eyes. Marcus tried to speak, but found that his voice was not working properly. His hands were shaking, and his legs felt weak. All of the confidence and arrogance that had carried him through the last hour had evaporated like mist in the morning sun. He was facing the consequences of his actions for the first time in his life, and discovering that being a champion kickboxer meant nothing when you were surrounded by trained soldiers in a foreign country. Palace security had been monitoring the situation through radio communications and surveillance cameras. The moment Marcus's kick connected with the guard's hat, multiple protocols went into effect automatically. The incident was classified as an assault on a member of the Royal Guard, which was a serious criminal offense under Thai law. Diplomatic notifications were sent to the American embassy and arrest procedures were initiated immediately. Sergeant Che stepped forward and spoke in perfect English with an accent that carried the authority of his rank and position. His voice was calm and controlled, but there was steel underneath that made every word carry tremendous weight. He informed Marcus that he was under arrest for assault and disrespecting the monarchy. He explained that Marcus had the right to remain silent and that anything he said could be used against him in court. The formal arrest was conducted with the same precision and professionalism that characterized everything the Royal Guard did. Within minutes, police vehicles began arriving at the scene. 5 police officers in crisp uniforms took custody of Marcus, while the Royal Guards maintained their positions to ensure order was preserved. Marcus was handcuffed with his hands behind his back and led toward a waiting police car, while dozens of cameras captured every moment of his humiliation. The cocky fighter, who had been showing off for the crowd just minutes earlier, was now being arrested like a common criminal. Jake tried to follow his friend but was told by police that he would need to contact the American embassy and arrange for legal representation. He was given a card with phone numbers and instructions, but was not allowed to ride in the police car or speak with Marcus privately. Jake watched helplessly as his childhood friend was driven away to face consequences that neither of them had ever imagined possible. The Bangkok police station where Marcus was taken was nothing like the clean modern facilities he had seen in American movies. The building was old and humid with concrete walls that seemed to absorb sound and hope equally. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant mixed with human sweat and desperation. As Marcus was processed through the booking system, he began to understand that this was not going to be a simple matter of paying a fine and walking away. The charges against him were more serious than he had imagined possible. Assault on a member of the Royal Guard was classified as a crime against the monarchy, which carried penalties of up to 15 years in prison under Thai law. The prosecutor explained through an interpreter that disrespecting the royal family or their representatives was one of the most serious offenses in Thailand. Thousands of people had been imprisoned for much less than what Marcus had done in front of dozens of witnesses. Marcus was placed in a holding cell with 20 other men in a space designed for 10. The cell was hot, cramped, and filled with people who spoke languages he did not understand. Some of his cellmates were local criminals who had been arrested for theft or drug possession. Others were foreign tourists who had made various mistakes during their visits to Thailand. But none of them had done anything as serious as assaulting a royal guard in broad daylight. The first night was the longest of Marcus's life. He sat on a thin mattress on the concrete floor listening to the sounds of the prison around him. Men were coughing, snoring, arguing, and crying in a dozen different languages. The single toilet in the corner provided no privacy, and the smell was overwhelming. Marcus had gone from luxury hotels and first-class flights to this nightmare in the span of a few hours. His championship belts and trophies seemed like they belonged to someone else's life. Sleep was impossible, so Marcus had plenty of time to think about what he had done and how he had gotten to this point. For the first time since becoming successful, he was forced to confront the ugly truth about the person he had become. The arrogance and disrespect that had seemed so entertaining when directed at opponents and reporters had led him to mock a man who was simply doing his duty with honor and dignity. Marcus began to realize that Sergeant Che had shown more strength and character in his stillness than Marcus had ever displayed in all his victories. Jake spent the first day frantically trying to get help for his friend. He contacted the American embassy and hired a local lawyer who specialized in cases involving foreign nationals. The lawyer was honest about the severity of the situation and warned that Marcus could be facing years in prison if the case went to trial. The only hope was to negotiate some kind of plea agreement that might result in deportation instead of a long prison sentence. The story had exploded across international media within hours of the arrest. Videos of Marcus kicking the guard's hat had been viewed millions of times on social media platforms around the world. News organizations were calling it everything from cultural insensitivity to international incident. The Thai government was under pressure to show that they took crimes against the monarchy seriously, while also maintaining good relations with the United States. Marcus's sponsors began distancing themselves from him immediately. The companies that had paid him millions of dollars to represent their brands did not want to be associated with someone who had assaulted a respected member of another country's military. His fighting license was suspended pending investigation, and his upcoming championship defense was canceled. The career that Marcus had built over 15 years was crumbling faster than he could have imagined possible. In the cell, Marcus met an older American man named Robert who had been arrested for a much smaller offense, but had been in the Thai prison system for 2 months. Robert explained how the system worked and warned Marcus that being a famous athlete would not protect him from the harsh realities of Thai justice. If anything, his celebrity status made him a bigger target because the government wanted to make an example of high-profile offenders. The food in prison was rice and vegetables twice a day with occasional pieces of fish or chicken that were more bone than meat. Marcus had been used to eating carefully planned meals designed to fuel his athletic performance. Now he was losing weight rapidly and feeling weaker every day. His hands, which had once been weapons, were now soft and pale from lack of training. His famous thunder kick seemed like a distant memory from someone else's life. Media interviews with Sergeant Che began appearing on Thai television and international news programs. The guard spoke eloquently about his duty to serve his country and his commitment to maintaining the dignity of his position despite provocation. He showed no anger toward Marcus, but expressed hope that the incident would help people understand the importance of respecting other cultures and traditions. His grace and professionalism made Marcus's behavior look even worse by comparison. Jake was allowed to visit Marcus after 3 days and was shocked by how much his friend had changed. The cocky, confident fighter had been replaced by a scared, confused man who seemed to have aged years in just a few days. Marcus begged Jake to do everything possible to get him out of the country, but Jake could only explain that lawyers were working on it and that these things took time. Both men knew that time was something Marcus might not have much of if the case went badly in court. After 3 weeks of intense diplomatic negotiations between the American embassy and Thai authorities, a deal was finally reached that would allow Marcus to avoid a lengthy prison sentence. The agreement required him to make a public apology to Surgeon Chai, and the Thai people accept deportation and a permanent ban from entering Thailand and pay substantial compensation to cover the cost of the damaged ceremonial uniform and the diplomatic incident he had caused. The public apology was broadcast live on Thai television and streamed online to millions of viewers around the world. Marcus stood before cameras looking thin and exhausted, wearing the same clothes he had been arrested in weeks earlier. His famous confidence was completely gone, replaced by genuine remorse and fear. He'd apologize not just for his actions, but for his attitude and lack of respect for Thai culture and traditions. He admitted that his arrogance had led him to behave in ways that were completely inappropriate and harmful. Sergeant Che was present for the apology and accepted Marcus's words with the same dignity and grace he had shown throughout the entire ordeal. The guard spoke briefly about forgiveness and the importance of learning from mistakes. He expressed hope that the incident would serve as a lesson for other visitors about the importance of respecting local customs and traditions. His response was so measured and professional that it made Marcus's original behavior seem even more shameful and immature. The flight back to America was the longest journey of Marcus's life. Jake sat beside him in economy class, since Marcus could no longer afford first-class tickets after paying his legal fees and compensation. Most of the other passengers recognized him from the viral videos and news coverage, but nobody asked for autographs or photos. Instead, they stared with a mixture of curiosity and disgust at the famous fighter who had become an international embarrassment. When Marcus arrived home, he discovered that his world had completely collapsed in his absence. His luxury apartment had been repossessed by the bank after he missed several mortgage payments while in jail. His expensive cars had been sold to help pay his debts. The gym that had been his second home for over a decade had terminated his membership and banned him from the premises. His name had been removed from all promotional materials, and his photos had been taken down from the walls. The fighting world had moved on without him faster than he could have imagined. His championship titles had been stripped and redistributed to other fighters. The sanctioning bodies that governed professional kickboxing had suspended his license indefinitely pending a full investigation into his conduct. Even if he wanted to return to fighting, the major promoters and venues would not work with someone who had become such a liability and embarrassment to the sport. Marcus tried to find work, but discovered that his reputation had made him unemployable in any field related to athletics or entertainment. Gyms would not hire him as a trainer because parents did not want their children learning from someone with his history. Sports media companies avoided him because advertisers did not want to be associated with his brand. Even small local businesses were hesitant to hire someone who might bring negative attention to their establishments. The financial consequences were devastating. Legal fees, compensation payments, and lost income had wiped out the millions of dollars Marcus had earned during his fighting career. He was forced to move back in with his parents in the same small Texas town he had left behind years earlier. The man who had once lived in penthouses and traveled the world in private jets was now sleeping in his childhood bedroom and looking for minimum wage work to pay his debts. Social media became a constant source of torment as the videos of his humiliation continued to circulate and generate new waves of criticism. Comment sections were filled with people calling him arrogant, stupid, and disrespectful. Memes and jokes about his downfall appeared daily on various platforms. The thunder kick that had once made him famous was now associated with failure and disgrace rather than athletic achievement. Jake remained loyal to his friend throughout the ordeal, but their relationship was forever changed. Jake had tried to warn Marcus repeatedly about his growing arrogance and disrespect, but had been ignored and dismissed. Now he found himself helping to clean up a mess that could have been easily avoided if Marcus had simply listened to reason and treated other people with basic human dignity and respect. Marcus spent his days working at a local hardware store loading trucks and stocking shelves for barely above minimum wage. His coworkers knew who he was, but nobody treated him like a celebrity. Some were curious about his story, but most just saw him as another employee trying to make ends meet. The physical labor was hard on his body, which had been conditioned for explosive athletic performance rather than repetitive manual work. In quiet moments, Marcus often thought about Sergeant Che and wondered what the guard was doing at that moment. He imagined him standing at his post with the same dignity and professionalism that Marcus had tried so hard to break. The guard had shown true strength by maintaining his composure and responding to assault with grace and forgiveness. Marcus realized that all of his championships and trophies had never made him as strong or admirable as that one man standing still in the face of provocation. The man who had once believed that physical power and fighting ability made him superior to everyone else learned the hardest lesson of his life. True strength comes from self-control, respect for others, and the wisdom to know when not to use the power you possess. Marcus Rodriguez, the Thunder Kick champion, was gone forever, replaced by a humbled man who finally understood that the most important victories in life come from conquering your own worst impulses rather than defeating opponents in a ring.